नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Hare Krishna. Welcome to Bhagavad Pravaha online course on the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the last 3 episodes, we have covered the first 15 chapters of the 11th canto, and today we will begin the 16th chapter. In the previous episode, as a part of Uddhava Gita, Krishna's teachings to his dearest devotee Uddhava, we have seen how Krishna established the process of Bhakti Yoga to be the supreme spiritual path. Krishna spoke about the process of disentanglement. He also refuted the Karma Mimamsa philosophy, and Krishna also spoke about the qualities of a conditioned soul and a liberated soul. And he finally established that Bhakti Yoga is the supreme spiritual path, and he also said that Gopis of Vrindavan, the Vrajavasis in general and specifically the Gopis of Vrindavan, are the topmost of all the devotees of Krishna. And Krishna also recounted these teachings of Lord Hamsa to the 4 Kumaras, who are the sons of Lord Brahma. And Krishna also spoke about Ashtanga Yoga, where the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga are elaborated by Krishna. And finally, Krishna also spoke in the 15th chapter about the 8 kinds of practices that an Ashtanga Yogi does to attain 8 kinds of siddhis, mystic siddhis. So these are the mystic perfections that one can attain. They are called Ashta Siddhis. So they are primarily 8, and there are 10 secondary siddhis also, but ultimately all of them are on a material plane. There are Anima Siddhi, Mahima Siddhi, means becoming greater than the greatest, becoming lighter than the lightest, becoming heavier than the heaviest. And also there are secondary siddhis like Parakaya Pravesha, means entering someone else's body. So ultimately all these siddhis are material in nature, and pure devotees who are relishing the nectar of service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, they do not take any pleasure in such external material siddhis or perfections. So Krishna concluded the 15th chapter with that note. Now in the beginning of the 16th chapter, Uddhava requests Krishna, my dear Krishna, you have spoken about the siddhis, different kinds of mystic perfections. Now I also want to know about your different opulences, your great powers by which you sustain the universe and pervade the universe. So Uddhava requested Krishna that, O Lord, you are situated in all superior and inferior creations. So I want to know your opulences. Please tell me about your potencies, which you manifest in all different directions. You are beginningless, you are endless, you are the supreme absolute truth. You are the foundation of this universe. So please tell me about your opulences. Then Krishna began responding to Uddhava. My dear Uddhava, even Arjuna also asked me a similar question. Now Krishna is giving his Uddhava Gita teachings to Uddhava. Now Krishna gave his Bhagavad Gita teachings to another friend Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So if you remember in the Bhagavad Gita also, in the 10th chapter of Gita, Arjuna requests Krishna to describe his divine opulences. Now Krishna describes all of them. That is called Vibhuti Yoga, the opulence of the absolute truth. Now Krishna describes his opulences to Uddhava also in Uddhava Gita. So Krishna describes, you can see the table. Amongst all the living entities, Krishna is the super soul. Amongst all the seekers of progress, Krishna is the ultimate goal. And amongst all things that can exert control over others, Krishna is the time factor. In this way, Krishna describes at least 100 of his opulences in this chapter. So amongst all the greatest things, Krishna is the total material creation. Amongst all the subtle things, Krishna is the spirit soul. Means all these things represent Krishna in that bigger category. So amongst all the Vedas, Krishna is represented by Brahma, and amongst all the mantras, Krishna is Omkara. So amongst all the Vedic sounds and mantras, Omkara is considered the supreme, and that Omkara is a representative of the Supreme Lord Krishna. So Krishna is the best of all. So amongst all the letters, Krishna is Akara. Amongst all the sacred meters, Krishna is the Gayatri meter, Gayatri mantra. Amongst all the Vasus, Krishna is Agni. Amongst all the sons of Aditi, Krishna is Vishnu. Amongst all the Rudras, Krishna is Shiva. And Shiva represents Krishna amongst all the Rudras. And Bhrigu represents Krishna amongst all the Brahmanas. Manu represents Krishna amongst all the saintly kings, means Rajarshis. Amongst all the saintly demigods, means amongst all the Devarshis, Krishna is represented by Narada Muni. And amongst all the cows, Krishna is Kamadhenu. Amongst all perfected beings, Krishna is Kapila. Amongst all the birds, Krishna is the mighty Garuda. Amongst all the Prajapatis, Krishna is Daksha. Amongst all the elephants, Krishna is Airavata. Amongst all the aquatics, means people who live within the water, Krishna is Varuna. Amongst all the Sarpas, Krishna is Vasuki, greatest of all serpents. Amongst all the Nagas, Krishna is Anantadeva. Amongst all the horses, Krishna is Uchchaishrava. In the 8th canto of Bhagavatam, we have seen that Uchchaishrava horse comes from the Samudra Manthan. And amongst all the social orders, Krishna is Sannyasa order, or the renounced order. Amongst all the occupational divisions, amongst all the Varnas, Krishna is represented by the Brahmanas. So Krishna is best of all. Amongst all the rivers, Krishna is Ganges. Means amongst all the flowing water bodies, Krishna is Ganges. Amongst all the steady water bodies, Krishna is ocean. So ocean does not flow, but rivers flow. Amongst all the flowing water bodies, Krishna is Ganga. So amongst all the residences, Krishna is Mount Sumeru. Amongst all the places, Krishna is Himalaya. Amongst all the vows, Krishna is non-violence or ahimsa. Amongst all the ladies, Krishna is Shatarupa. Amongst all the priests, Krishna is Vasishtha. Amongst all the brahmacharis, Sanat Kumara represents Krishna, and Brahma represents Krishna in all the pairs, conjugal pairs. Amongst all the months, Krishna is Margasirsha month. Amongst all the ages, Krishna is Satyayuga. Amongst all the yugas, Krishna is Satyayuga. And amongst all the jewels, Krishna is Ruby. Amongst all the kinds of grasses, Krishna is Kusha grass. And amongst all the oblations which we put in the fire, Krishna is Ghee. And amongst all the devotees, Krishna is the devotional activities. Amongst all the apsaras, Krishna is represented by Purvachitti. And amongst within water, Krishna is the sweet taste. Means Krishna not only is the best of all things, Krishna also becomes the essential principle, active principle of every object. So the greatest quality of water is its taste. So Krishna is that taste. Krishna speaks that same thing in Bhagavad Gita also. Rasohum apsu kaunteya prabhasmi shishishuryayoho jivanam sarva bhuteshu. Means within water, Krishna is taste. And amongst all the luminaries, it is Krishna who is represented by the effulgence of all these luminaries. So in this way, Krishna's opulences are all pervading, and Krishna sustains the entire universe by being the active principle of all great things in the universe. So Krishna says that all these items with their individual symptoms and the steady conviction that results from the knowledge, they represent me. So in the 38th shloka, Krishna says, Sankhyanam paramadunam kalena kriyate mayam natatha me vibhutinam srujato nandi kotishaha. I am the basis of all living entities and their qualities and mahattattva and everything. Nothing can exist without me being its foundation. So Krishna very conclusively establishes himself to be the source and sustenance and the active principle of everything that exists in the entire material creation. So as Krishna said in the Vibhuti Yoga in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also enumerates his material and spiritual vibhutis or opulences in the 16th chapter of the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, which is the Uddhava Gita. So now in the 40th shloka, Krishna says, Tejaha shrir kirtiraishwaryam hrihityaga saubhagam bhagaha Viryam titiksha vijnanam yatra yatra samemsakah. So whatever is powerful or beautiful or great or famous, so they are simply an expansion of Krishna. So without being an expansion of Krishna, without being blessed or empowered by Krishna, something or someone cannot become great or famous or beautiful or attractive or influential in any way. So Krishna is the greatness of all the great things. Krishna is the beauty of all beautiful things. Krishna is the power within all powerful things. So without Krishna, nothing can exist, nothing can survive, nothing can be born, so nothing can maintain itself. So in this way, Krishna very briefly described his vibhutis, material and spiritual vibhutis. So it's not possible even for Krishna also to count all his vibhutis. So one should just control one's mind and try to understand Krishna and perform devotion towards Krishna to the best of one's ability. But one can never understand Krishna completely, and even Krishna also cannot describe himself completely because he is so unlimited. So by being devoted to Krishna, then one can come out of the material existence. Now, by understanding that Krishna is the active principle or the source of the power of everything that exists within the creation, we will be Krishna conscious. When we are drinking water, we understand that Krishna is the taste of this water. Thus, just by drinking water also we can become Krishna conscious. So that is the purpose of all this information given in Uddhava Gita and Bhagavad Gita. So we can become Krishna conscious. Now there is description of Virat Rupa also. So the mountains are the bones of the Supreme Lord Krishna, and the trees are like trees and plants are like hairs of the Lord. So in this way, when we see different elements within this creation, within this universe, they can remind us of Krishna when we refer to the information given in the scriptures. So for that we need to control our mind from desiring sense gratification from these elements of the universe, and we should focus our mind that all these elements of the universe are manifested by the power of the Lord, and they are just giving me a reminder, they are reminding me of the Supreme Lord Krishna to make me Krishna conscious. So 17th chapter. So we completed the 16th chapter where Krishna described his divine opulences. Now in the 17th and 18th chapters, Krishna describes Varnashrama Dharma. There is a description of Varnashrama Dharma because Uddhava asks Krishna, Krishna, you have spoken me Gnana, a lot of knowledge through the teachings of Hamsavatar to 4 Kumaras, and you have also spoken a lot about Bhakti Yoga. You have also spoken about Ashtanga Yoga. So Krishna covered Bhakti, Ashtanga and Gnana. But what about Karma Yoga? Means now Karma Yoga means connecting with the Supreme through one's prescribed work. And Gnana Yoga means connecting to the Supreme Lord through one's knowledge. Yesterday we have discussed that. Ashtanga Yoga means connecting to the Supreme Lord with meditation. Ashtanga Yoga we discussed yesterday. And Bhakti Yoga means connecting with the Supreme through loving devotion. That also we have discussed yesterday. So Krishna, you have spoken about Ashtanga, then Gnana and Bhakti. So I want to know about Karma Yoga now. So basically that is Varnashrama Dharma. So you have described the principles of Bhakti, but can you please elaborate on the principles of Varnashrama through which one can also perform Bhakti? So the purpose of doing various duties within Varnashrama system is ultimately to invoke one's loving attraction towards Krishna. Samsiddhir haritoshanam ataha pumbhir dvijashrestha varnashrama vibhagashaha swanishtitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. So all the rules and regulations prescribed for people of different ashramas and different varnas are ultimately meant to invoke their loving attraction towards Krishna. So there are 4 varnas and there are 4 ashramas. In the 7th canto, chapter number 11 to 15 also, we have discussed this varnashrama system. Now also in this Uddhava Gita, 11th canto Bhagavatam, the 17th and 18th chapters are describing varnashrama system. There are 4 varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. So Brahmanas are the intellectual class, and Kshatriyas are the administrative class, and Vaishyas are the businessmen, mercantile class, and Shudras are the working class. So all these four classes are not according to one's birth. So one cannot say that he or she belongs to certain caste because of their birth, but Krishna clearly says that Chaturvarnyam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. So depending on one's gunas, qualities, and karma, one's activities, one's caste is decided in the Vedic system. In the Vedic system, although a person is born as say Kshatriya, but if he manifests the qualities of a Brahmana, he is accepted as a Brahmana. And although somebody is born in a higher caste, if he presents the qualities of a lower caste person, that person cannot be accepted as a person who belongs to higher caste. Such people are called Brahmabandhu. Only by birth they are Brahmanas, but they are not having any Brahmanical qualities. So basically, according to one's qualities and activities, one's Varna is decided, that is Varnas. There are 4 ashramas. Ashramas are Brahmachari ashram, the initial phase of one's life, which is the training phase, or the student life, that is Brahmachari ashram. Grihastha ashram is the household life, married life. Then Vanaprastha ashram is the retired life. After leading Grihastha ashram for a while, then one can retire from that responsibilities of family life. He can be called Vanaprastha. Then final ashram is Sannyasa ashram, means renounced order, complete dedication to spiritual practices without any other social or family obligations. That is Sannyasa ashram. So these are the 4 ashramas. We discussed 4 varnas and 4 ashramas in brief, but let's go into some more details based on what Krishna speaks. So Krishna describes to Uddhava that in the Satya Yuga there is only one social class, that is Hamsa. Hamsa means Hamsa is literally means a swan. So swan is very pure. Swan has the ability to separate milk and water also. So Hamsa are a category of people who are extremely pure in their activities and characteristics. So the 11th shloka says, so Veda is expressed by the syllable Om, and I am the only object of material activities. Krishna is the only object of material activities, and Krishna also manifests as the 4-legged bull of religion, dharma, and one should worship the Supreme Lord as Lord Hamsa, Hamsavatar. So now the qualities of people in Satya Yuga are very exalted, and they don't have any they don't have many shortcomings in their character. So most of the people in Satya Yuga, they belong to the Hamsa category, or they are very elevated in their character and behavior. So now in Treta Yuga, then Varnashrama division began. So there is appearance of Vedic division of Varnashrama. So people have to be separated. In Satya Yuga there are predominantly people are of very high character, but as the Yuga progressed, so the qualities started diminishing. Then in Treta Yuga, then there is Vedic division, and there is also Varnashrama that became more prominent. So Varnashrama appeared from the universal form of the Lord, as we discussed in the 2nd canto of Bhagavatam also. So you can see that picture. So Brahmanas represent the face of the Lord, and Kshatriyas represent the arms of the Lord, Vaishyas represent the thighs of the Lord, and Shudras represent the legs of the Lord. So all are important, and this is all according to one's qualities and activities and not according to one's birth. And Grihasthas represent the lions of the Lord, and Brahmacharis represent the heart of the Lord, and Vanaprasthas represent the chest of the Lord, and Sannyasis represent the head of the Lord. So in this way we can compare different varnas and ashramas also with different limbs of the Supreme Lord's body, but all the limbs are important. At the same time, all these varnas are decided according to one's qualities and not according to one's birth. So now Krishna emphasizes this. So Varnashrama is according to one's qualities, and ashramas, varnas are according to one's qualities, ashramas are according to one's phases of life. So student life is called Brahmachari life. So now these are the qualities of different ashramas, different varnas. So Brahmanas are characterized by their peacefulness, self-control, austerity, cleanliness, satisfaction, tolerance, and then straightforwardness and devotion to the Lord. So if one has all these qualities, one can be accepted as Brahmana, irrespective of what that person's birth could be. And Kshatriyas have power, bodily strength, determination, heroism, fighting in a battle and never showing their back to the enemies in the battle. So then steadiness and devotion to Brahmanas. So they take guidance of Brahmanas. So they are called Kshatriyas. Then Vaishyas, they have faith in Vedic civilization and they are very charitable. They are not hypocritical. They have service attitude towards Brahmanas. So they are Vaishyas. And Shudras, they render service to Brahmanas and without any duplicity, and they also serve cows and the demigods, and they have complete satisfaction with whatever comes of its own accord. So these are different good qualities of the four Varnas. And people who are very dirty, then dishonest, and they steal from others, they have no faith in spiritual life, and they unnecessarily get into quarrel, and they are overly lusty and angry and hankering. They have a lot of hankering. Such people cannot technically be called in one of these ashrams. So in the 20th shloka of this chapter, Krishna puts them in the category of outcast. Okay, so these are the qualities of different Brahmanas, different Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. Now there are different ashramas. So Krishna describes the qualities of the Brahmachari in a Brahmachari ashram. So Brahmachari regularly worships the sun god and acharyas and cows and brahmanas and respects elderly people, and a Brahmachari stays in the ashram of a guru and learns various spiritual subject matters from that guru. And a Brahmachari should have great respect for guru. So Krishna says in this Uddhava Gita that Guru is non-different from Krishna. It's not that Guru is Krishna. Guru never thinks that I am God, but a disciple must respect Guru as much as he respects the Supreme Lord Krishna. Krishna says, Acharyam mam vijaniyan navamanyeta karhichit namartya buddhyasu yeta sarvadeva mayo guru. Acharyam mam vijaniyam. Understand that Acharya is not different from me. So, na avamanyeta karhichit, never insult a guru or Acharya. So, Acharya means one who does achar, practice of spiritual principles, and then demonstrate it to disciple, not only by his teachings but also by his actions or behavior. So, Acharyam ma vijaniyam na avamanyeta karhichit, never insult, never disrespect an Acharya. So, na martya buddhya asuyeta. Martya buddhya means never consider a guru to be an ordinary human being. Martya buddhya. And asuyeta, never envy a guru. Oh, why guru is accepting so many facilities while I have to render service to him? One should not think like that. So, a disciple should respect guru and worship guru and follow the instructions of guru and respect him as much as he respects the Supreme Lord. Then Sarvadeva Mayo Guruhu. Guru is like the personification of all devatas. So Guru has to be respected in this way. And also traditionally a disciple, a brahmachari who is living in the ashram of a guru, he goes out begging with a begging bowl to different places, and whatever he begs, he submits in front of the guru, and guru gives him food. So then brahmacharis are of two types. One is Upakurvana Brahmachari, second is Naishtika Brahmachari. Upakurvana Brahmachari is a brahmachari who stays within the Guru's ashram up to certain age for training, and after completing his brahmachari training, so he takes a decision to go to Grihastha ashram. So he is Upakurvana Brahmachari is a brahmachari only up to certain age, up to certain time, then he can go to Grihastha ashram. But Naishtika Brahmachari is a person who continues in the Guru's ashram only, who continues as a brahmachari, as a celibate for the rest of his life. So not only that, for him brahmachari life is not just one phase in life, throughout his life he is like a brahmachari only, celibate. So no connection with women. So these are the two types of brahmacharis. So, and Krishna further describes the duties of a Naishtika Brahmachari, he has to study Vedas and worship the Supreme Lord and all these things. And further, Grahasthashram is described. So Krishna describes the duties of a householder. So a householder is supposed to take permission from Guru after completing his Brahmachari training, then he can enter married life. And he can remain in married life, staying with a wife for some amount of time and fulfill all the responsibilities of a householder. And if he is completely purified and if he is inspired, he can go to sannyas ashram after grahastha ashram. But if he is not yet completely purified, after fulfilling the responsibilities of family life, he can enter retired life of vanaprastha. And as a retired person, he can pursue his spiritual practices. But if one's renounced spirit is so strong, one is fully inspired, after grahastha ashram, one can directly enter sannyas ashram also. So these are various qualities and activities within householder life. So next, householders also, they have different protocols depending on which varna they belong to. A Brahmana Grahastha and a Kshatriya Grahastha, they have different kinds of duties. A Brahmana Grahastha, although he is staying in household life, he does not earn his livelihood by working under someone, but he will teach other people and he will educate the Kshatriya class. But a Kshatriya Grahastha, he can collect taxes from the citizens in his kingdom and he will rule, he will administer, he will manage. So that's how he will live. So like the different duties are mentioned for people of different ashramas and different varanas. Then in this way Krishna very elaborately describes, and also a grahastha should also understand that the family life and the family obligations and family members are quite temporary in the householder life. So one should not be unduly attached to household comforts or even members of the family. So one should be very responsible in one's relationship with them, but also understand that this relationship is not eternal, but it is temporary. Only in this lifetime these people are my associates, but I have a permanent eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord. But these family members, although Krishna has put me under their care and I have to responsibly attend to their needs and I have to render service to them, but still I also understand that they are all temporary. So the association of family is just like a brief meeting of travelers. Krishna says in the 53rd shloka of this chapter, he says, Putra darapta bandhunam angamaha pantha sangamaha. So putra means children, then dara means wife, bandhu means relatives. So a person's meeting with these family members or friends or relatives is very brief, and it is like a travelers meeting at one place. For example, somebody is traveling in a train and then he has co-passengers, but the journey can last for 10 hours or 20 hours or could be 1 hour, and after that they disperse. Similarly, a living entity may enter a human body and he will come in contact with certain family members of wife, children, and then family members, relatives, and all that. And that person's association with these family members and friends is only as long as that person dwells within that material body. So according to his own fruitive baggage, once his tenure within this material body is completed, the soul has to leave this body and go to another body. So then the relationships that he develops through this material body are cut there. So one should understand the temporary nature of one's material relationships also, but at the same time one needs to be responsible as long as one is in that relationship. This does not encourage indifference and negligence towards relationships, but it emphasizes the greater and deeper understanding that they are temporary in nature and we have eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord, and we need to pursue that. We should not think that these material relationships are all in all, and we should not just dwell our mind and body and words totally into that only without pursuing our higher spiritual goals. So this conception of being me and mine, so that's very detrimental to one's spiritual progress. So then life of Vanaprastha is described in the next chapter, 18th chapter. So Krishna describes that Vanaprastha means a person who has retired from his family life. So that person has to live a very simple life, not many household comforts, no more indulgence in sex, and clothing also should be very simple. So one should not groom his hair. So like that, so much of personal decoration and a lot of bodily maintenance related things should reduce. And he should do austerities, and he should control his diet. So these are various qualities of a Vanaprastha, activities of a Vanaprastha. Then as a sannyasi, when one takes to sannyasa, his dressing style should be extremely simple, and he should maintain this quality of ahimsa. So he should not, he should try not to step on creatures while walking on the pathway also. He should drink water only after filtering that water with a cloth, and he should speak only truthful words, and he should perform activities which are very pure. One should not indulge in any business or this and that as a sannyasi. So one should avoid useless talks, one should avoid useless activities, one should control the prana, life air. So in this way, and a sannyasi is also allowed to beg from one house to another house. He may not work somewhere to earn his livelihood, but he is dependent on charity. That's what a sannyasi is. And his eating habits are also very pure and very controlled. So in this way, Krishna describes the life of a sannyasi also in great detail. And there is a person who is beyond these varnas and ashramas. Such people are called paramahamsas. They are very exalted devotees of the Supreme Lord. They are wise people. They behave like innocent children. Not ignorant, but they are totally innocent. They are completely free from any other obligations. A child can do anything. And they are expert, but they behave in a very, very modest manner, and they behave as if they are stunned, and some people could misunderstand them as mad people also, but internally they are relishing great love of God within, and they are very learned, but speak as if they are insane. So they are very exalted people. They are beyond any rules and regulations or social customs. So such people are called paramahamsas. So while they are behaving with others, they are never frightened, or they will never frighten others, and they tolerate criticism of others, but they don't criticize others, and they never express any negative opinion about anyone. So they are never violent for the sake of material body. So these are the qualities of a paramahamsa, who is beyond all these varnas and ashramas. So in this way, Krishna describes varnas and ashramas, and he gives a quick summary in the 42nd shloka. He says that sannyasis have this quality of equanimity and non-violence, and vanaprasthas, they have the quality of austerity and knowledge of body and soul. Grahasthas give shelter to all other jivas, because they can earn livelihood, they can maintain other people who are not earning livelihood, so they also perform sacrifices. And brahmacharis are engaged in Vedic study and rendering services to Guru. So these are the prominent activities of the four ashramas. And later Krishna presents the ultimate essence. Ultimately, all these rules and regulations for a brahmachari or vanaprastha, sannyasi, grahastha, like four varnas and four ashramas, are ultimately meant to please the Supreme Lord. Samsiddhir haritoshanam, that's the highest principle. So Krishna says in the 44th shloka that itimam yah swadharmena bhajen nityam ananya bhak sarva bhuteshu madbhavo madbhaktim vindate dridham. Itimam yo swadharmena. Swadharma means one's own dharma. As a brahmachari or a vanaprastha or a brahmana or a sannyasi, one's own duty as a person belonging to certain ashrama or varna. Varna dharma and ashrama dharma. So one should do one's swadharma according to one's varna or ashrama, and bhajen nityam ananya bhak. One should also worship the Supreme Lord Krishna, ananya bhak, without any deviation in the mind. So sarva bhuteshu madbhavo, and one should also see the presence of the Supreme Lord within the hearts of all living entities in general. Mad bhaktim vindate dridham, such people can attain bhakti unto the Supreme Lord. Dridham, very determined love for the Lord, they can attain. In the 45th shloka, Krishna says that Bhaktyodhavanapayindya sarvaloka maheshwaram sarvatopatyam brahma karanam mopayati saha. One who worships, oh Uddhava, one who worships me with unflinching bhakti can come to me. So following certain duties of Varna and Ashrama systems, so that's beneficial as long as one lives in the human society. That's a very civilized way of living human life. But the human life itself is temporary, and the whole world itself is temporary. So we should pursue something superior, something eternal. So while living comfortably a civilized life according to the prescribed rules and regulations by the Shastras, one should also pursue one's spiritual goal. So bhakti is transcendental to this material world. So while following the practices of Varna and Ashrama, one should perform worship of Lord Hari and then go back to Hari. That's what is being emphasized by Krishna repeatedly here. 47th shloka, finally Krishna says, Varnashramacharavatam Varnashramatvam dharmam esha achara lakshanah sa esha mad bhakti yukto nishreyasa parah. When all Varnashram duties are dedicated to me in loving service, they award supreme perfection in life. So one should perform the duties of Varnashrama, but to please the Supreme Lord Hari. That completes the 18th chapter. Now we will enter the 19th chapter. So in the 19th chapter, Krishna describes that ultimately bhakti has to be performed after cultivating jnana also. So jnana means cultivating spiritual knowledge. You may develop knowledge of various things in this world, but ultimately what is more beneficial for the soul is the spiritual knowledge about the Supreme Lord Krishna's attributes and various other things. So one may cultivate a lot of things, cultivate knowledge about lot of things in this world to live properly in this world, but all that knowledge may not be fully relevant for the soul. But as long as the soul is within the body to conduct the life, one has to develop so much knowledge, but one has to relinquish all that knowledge to pursue a higher goal of devotion to the Supreme Lord and to enter the Supreme Lord's abode. So the Supreme Lord Krishna is the goal in Bhakti Yoga. So the highest realization can be attained only by practicing Bhakti Yoga, not just by merely developing knowledge about various things in this world. So now Uddhava asks a question to Krishna. Krishna, can you please elaborate Jnana and Bhakti in greater detail? And he offers a prayer in the 9th shloka, beautiful shloka. Tapatrayena bhihatasya ghore santapyamanasya bhavadhanisha pashyami nanyat-charanam tavanghri dvandvapapatrad amrutabhivarshat. O Krishna, your lotus feet are the shelter for one who is tormented by the cycle of birth and death. Tapatrayena abhitasya ghore. So ghora means very fearsome. So this material existence is filled with tapatrayas, threefold material miseries, adhyatmika, adibhautika and adidaivika kleshas. So to overcome this material existence, to surpass this ocean of nescience, one has to take shelter of the Supreme Lord Krishna. So, and that the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Krishna would act like umbrella to protect us from the rains of material miseries. So Krishna, Uddhava glorified Krishna like this and requested Krishna to elaborate on the paths of Jnana and Karma, Jnana and Bhakti more. Then Krishna quotes Bhishma. So Bhishma once gave such teachings to Yudhishthira Maharaj. I will repeat those teachings to you, my dear Uddhava. Then he elaborately describes that Jnana means knowledge about different elements in this material world. We have already discussed in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that Kapila describes various elements. In the 26th chapter of 3rd canto we discussed about Sankhya. So there are different elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. There are gross elements. There are sense objects also, tanmatras. That's like a touch and taste and other things. Form. And also there are sense devatas. There are 10 senses, 5 working senses and 5 knowledge senses. And we have Mahat Tattva, false ego, then mind. There are different elements. So these are all material elements. And there is spirit, soul, and there is Supreme Lord Krishna. These are spiritual in nature. So to develop knowledge about all the spiritual and material things is Jnana. So there are 28 such elements. These elements are counted in different ways. Some say 28, some say 26, some say 25, some say 5, some say 7. So all these counts are valid depending on what perspective they are holding in their mind. But anyways, developing knowledge about elements which are spiritual and material both, that is called Jnana or knowledge. Then Vijnana means one's experience when one sees that the Supreme Lord is the cause of all these elements. So one should realize what is the purpose of these elements and what is the connection between these elements and me, and what is the connection between these elements and the Supreme Lord, and act accordingly on that platform of knowledge. So then that leads to realization, that is Vijnana. So one's experience when one sees the cause of the Supreme Lord, cause of these elements as the Supreme Lord, is Vijnana. And ultimately the Lord is the cause of everything. Some people may also develop knowledge about material elements, but they just do material analysis. They forget the spiritual element there. So there is soul and there is super soul. They are spiritual in nature. So just analyzing only material elements, keeping aside the soul and super soul is not very much appreciated. So you need to develop knowledge about both matter and spirit. So that is the real Sankhya, that is the real Jnana. So when you act on that platform of the understanding of matter and spirit, then it is Vijnana. So then that leads to Vairagya. So knowing that you analyze matter and spirit and you understand that matter is temporary and spirit is eternal, then you develop attachment to spirit and develop detachment from matter. So that is called Vairagya. So Jnana we have discussed, Vijnana we have discussed, we will discuss Vairagya now. Vairagya means developing detachment from matter. And just developing detachment from matter is not sufficient, we should also develop attachment to spirit. So now this Vairagya can be attained through 4 kinds of evidences. So they are called Shruti, means Vedic knowledge. Next, Pratyaksham, direct experience. Directly experience that the material elements are temporary. Shruti, the Vedas also teach us that these material elements are temporary, you be detached from it. Then also Atihiyam. Third is Atihiyam, means traditional wisdom. So according to tradition also we can understand. Then Anumanam, logical deduction. So sometimes you may not directly perceive, but your logic can teach you that this is temporary in nature. Okay, you may not directly have perceived it. So through these 4 ways you can develop Vairagya, you can develop renunciation. So then Krishna further describes various angas of bhakti. So this is all Jnana. Jnana, Vijnana, then Vairagya, 3 things. So then bhakti is described further. There are various angas of bhakti. You can see that slokas number 20 and 21, 20th shloka. So these slokas describe various angas or limbs of bhakti, various kinds of practices in devotional service. So Krishna says, Shraddhamrita kathayam me shashvanmadanu parinishta cha pujayam stutibhihi stavanam mama. So Shraddhamrita kathayam me. Shraddha means faith. In what? Amrita kathayam me. In the nectarian narrations of the Supreme Lord Krishna. That's one aspect of bhakti. We should have eagerness to hear about Krishna. That narrations about Krishna are like nectar. Shraddhamrita kathayam me. Next, second is Shashvan Madanukirtanam. Constantly singing the glories of the Lord in the form of chanting His holy names or narrating His pastimes. Third, Paridishtacha Pujayam. Doing puja with great faith and nishtha and sincerity. So Parinishthata Pujayam. Puja means worship. Then 4th element is Stutibihi Stavanam Mama. Stuti means praising the Lord. Stava or stuti means praising or glorifying the Lord, offering prayers to the Lord. 21st shloka. Adaraha paricharyayam sarvangair abhivandanam madbhakta puja bhyadika sarva bhuteshu manmatihi. So adaraha paricharyayam. Adara means giving respect to elders. We should respect elder people. We should not insult them. Then sarvangair abhivandanam. And one should also offer obeisances with one's entire body when they meet elders, and of course in front of the deities also. Then madbhakta puja bhyadika. So amongst all respectable people, devotees are most respectable and most worshipable. So Krishna says that performing extensive worship of my devotees, madbhakta means Krishna's devotees, puja bhyadika means you have to worship them exclusively. Adhika means you have to give preferential treatment to the devotees. So, sarva bhuteshu manmatihi. You should also understand that I am present in all the hearts of living entities, other living entities. Means basically you need to see the connection between the Supreme Lord and all the living entities and then respect them for their connection with the Lord. Next, 22nd shloka. Madartheshu angacheshta cha vachasa madguneranam mayyarpanam cha manasaha sarvakama vivarjanam madarthe artha parityago bhogasya ja sukhasya cha ishtam dattam hutam japtam madartham yadvratam tapaham. So Krishna further describes various practices in bhakti yoga or angas of bhakti. He says madartheshu angacheshta cha. Angacheshta means whatever activities that we do with these bodily limbs. Madartheshu, dedicate them to Krishna. Second, vachasamad guneranam, use your words in glorifying Krishna's qualities. Next, mayyarpanam cha manasaha, dedicate your mind to me. Means body, mind and word should be dedicated to Krishna only. Then he says, sarvakama vivarjanam, reject all kamas, means material desires. Next, madarthe artha parityago, for my sake, give up your material wealth. So give up your material wealth means you don't have to relinquish or throw it away. You can use that material wealth, madarthe, for the purpose of worshipping Krishna. Then bhogasya cha sukhasya cha, renounce this bhoga means material enjoyment, sukhasya, material happiness. And ishtam dattam hutam japtam, you perform various activities of charity and then do offerings and homa and japa and sacrifices, all these things for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. So by performing all these activities which are described in these 4 shlokas, 20, 21, 22, 23, one can surrender unto the Supreme Lord Krishna and attain his bhakti. And Krishna then describes that actual dharma is to perform bhakti unto Krishna. We discussed already in the first canto of Bhagavatam. Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhakti radhukshaje. Paro dharma, the supreme dharma or supreme duty of every single living entity is to perform bhakti unto Krishna. Then real knowledge is to be aware of Krishna's all-pervading presence. Detachment is complete disinterest in objects of sense gratification. And opulences are these 8 mystic perfections, Ashtasiddhis. Like that Krishna defines all of them. And when Krishna gave these 4 definitions, Uddhava asked, "Oh Krishna, can you please give some more definitions? Can you please give me the standard definitions for all universal aspects of civilized life? Like humility, then equilibrium, sense control. Just tell me what exactly they mean in a very concise and crisp and eloquent form." Then Krishna gives us standard definitions of the universal aspects of civilized life. You can see the table. Yama niyama refer to the rules and regulations that we need to follow. So what are they? Non-violence, truthfulness, then not stealing others' property, detachment, humility, freedom from possessiveness, and then forgiveness, fearlessness. These are all various qualities that one is supposed to have. Then internal cleanliness, external cleanliness. Internally being clean means your mind should be devoid of any material thoughts. Externally being clean means you have to bathe nicely and wear fresh clothes and all that. then chanting the holy names of the Lord, austerity, sacrifice, faith, hospitality, worshipping the Lord, visiting holy places, then acting and desiring only for the supreme interest, means spiritual interest, satisfaction, serving Guru. These are all various do's and don'ts that are prescribed. Now, let's see the definitions of all of them. Equilibrium means absorbing one's intelligence in Krishna. That's the real equilibrium. Balance. Then balance in life is attained by absorbing oneself in Krishna. Then self-control means disciplining the senses. Okay. Then tolerance means patiently enduring suffering. That is tolerance. So suffering is inevitable in this material world and we need to tolerate that. We should have to patiently endure it. Then determination means being very steadfast in controlling one's tongue and genitals. That is determination. Then further, in the 29th shloka, Krishna describes the definition of charity. Supreme charity is to give up aggression towards others. Means don't cause any harm to others. Don't trouble others. Don't cause any inconvenience to others. Don't be aggressive towards them. That's the real charity. Then austerity is renunciation of material enjoyment. Heroism is to conquer one's natural tendency to enjoy on a material plane. Then reality is to see Krishna everywhere. Truth means to see all beings as one's own self. So now, if I have some pain on my hand, I'll suffer. If another person is also having some wound on his hand, he will also suffer. Understand, empathize with him. So don't think that your pain is more important and other people's pains are irrelevant for you. So having an empathetic quality and seeing other people also as yourself. Sometimes we may be very lenient towards us and then very harsh towards others. We may hurt them mentally and emotionally, or we may hurt them physically also, or when they are physically or emotionally hurt, we may be indifferent towards them. So one should actually understand that I am a soul, I am a fragmental part of Krishna, I am a servant of Krishna. Similarly, the other person is also like me. He is also a child of God. So his happiness or distress is my happiness and distress also. So that seeing all the other living entities as equal to oneself is the quality of being truthful. That's the absolute truth. We are all souls. We are all children of God. Then cleanliness is detachment from material activities. So the real cleanliness is the cleanliness of one's consciousness. When the consciousness is clean, one automatically keeps one's external body and surroundings also clean. So then renunciation means sannyas order of life, and the spirit of detachment from all material things. Then sacrifice means the Supreme Lord himself is called sacrifice, and any activity done for his pleasure is also sacrifice. So in this way Krishna keeps on defining all these terms. Strength means strength comes by pranayama, following pranayama. So opulence, profit, then education, modesty. Modesty means is to be disgusted with improper activities. That is modesty. Beauty is to possess good qualities. Happiness is to transcend material happiness and distress. That is happiness, real happiness, spiritual happiness. Misery is to be implicated in search for sex pleasure. That's the greatest misery in this world. So in this way Krishna defines various aspects of civilized life. Who is rich man, who is poor man, what is false path, what is true path, all that Krishna describes. You can all go through this chapter. Then finally Krishna concludes. He says that there is no need for more elaboration on this subject matter. There are so many good qualities and bad qualities, but a wise person, an intelligent person should not discriminate between good qualities and bad qualities in other people. Because when we see good in others, we may get impressed. When we see bad in others, we may get little disgusted with them. But that good and bad, both are material in nature. So one should transcend that material good and material bad. So Krishna says that one has to transcend this good and evil. One should not see good or bad in others. That itself is a bad quality, Krishna says. Although Krishna says like this, Acharyas explain that one can see good in others and appreciate them for that good. when they are exhibiting some good qualities. But not seeing bad in others is a very important thing that we have to imbibe. So although Krishna is saying two things, don't see good, don't see bad, but don't see bad is more important than not seeing good. So although somebody is manifesting some good qualities, and although those good qualities are on a material plane, still one can appreciate them to a certain degree. But one should not criticize other people unnecessarily for their bad. So Krishna concludes this whole narration like that. Then in the 20th chapter, Uddhava has a question. Oh Lord, you are saying that don't discriminate between good or bad, or piety or sin, or auspicious or inauspicious, everything is on a material plane and all that. So how can we not discriminate between piety and sin? How can we not discriminate between good and bad? Although they are all of them are on a material plane, we have to be tolerant, we have to be we have to have equanimity towards all of them, but still that the difference will come. There is difference between good and bad, there is difference between piety and sin. So Uddhava could not digest this and he asked another question. And even good and bad, what is good, what is bad is mentioned in the Vedic literatures also. Then Krishna gives a very mature and elaborate answer to this, very deep answer. He says that there are only three paths for perfection. 1, karma; 2, jnana; 3, bhakti. Of these three, bhakti is superior. We have discussed it several times, and Krishna also mentioned it so far. In Uddhava Gita itself he mentioned. So now Krishna says that the qualification for jnana is detachment. The qualification for karma is attachment. You can see the 7th shloka, we will recite that. Nirvinnanam jnana yogo nyasinam iha karmasu tesva nirvinna chittanam karma yogastu kaminam. So a person who is materially attached is a karmi. A person who is totally detached from material things is jnani. So detachment is the quality for jnani, and attachment is the qualification for karma. And what is the qualification for bhakti? Balanced attachment and detachment. So now earlier Krishna said, okay, don't bother about good and bad on a material plane, which is true. But now Krishna describes something more deeper and higher. He says that if you are too much into detachment, you are on the path of jnana. You are too much into attachment, then it's karma. But qualification for bhakti is not having too much of attachment, not having too much of detachment. He says, Yadrichaya mat kathado jata shraddhastu yah puman na nirvinno nati shakto bhakti yogo asya siddhidah. Yadrichaya mat kathado. The qualification for bhakti is to hear Krishna katha mat kathado. Then jata shraddhastu yah puman means to have faith in those descriptions of Krishna. That's a very important qualification for bhakti. And na nirvinno, na nirvinno na atishakto. Na nirvinno means not being too detached and not being too attached on a material plane. That is a qualification for bhakti yoga. So now in the 9th shloka he says, Tavat karmani kurvita na nirvidyeta yavata matkatha shravanadav va shraddha yavanna jayate. He says that till you develop that shraddha in my katha, till then you have to follow Vedic injunctions and then keep discriminating between good and bad. Earlier Krishna said, he gave definitions of various aspects of civilized life. Towards the end he said, ultimately this good and bad we should not consider so much. We should not criticize bad, we should not get too excited with good. So we should be neutral there. Then Uddhava asked him that even Vedas also describe what is piety, what is sin, what is auspicious, what is inauspicious, what is good, what is bad. How can we be detached from it? Then Krishna said there are three paths. Karma, where you are too attached. Jnana, where you are too detached. Bhakti, you are having a balanced attachment and detachment. And you have great shraddha, or you have great faith in Krishna Katha. So till you develop that great faith in Krishna Katha, you continue to discriminate between good and bad. You continue the teachings of Vedas and follow all the Vedic paths and then follow Vedic injunctions. So because you are not yet satiated from fruitive activities and you have not yet awakened taste for bhakti. So having lot of shraddha or faith in Krishna Katha means having lot of taste for bhakti. You have not taste for bhakti, you don't have so much of taste for bhakti, and you have not given up your taste for material enjoyment yet. So till then you keep discriminating between good and bad. So, but someone who is on a very advanced level, yesterday we were discussing about Uttamadhikari, day before yesterday. So when somebody is very advanced, he does not discriminate between good people and bad people. He only sees that everybody is a child of God, everybody is a lover of God, everybody is a servant of God. He does not discriminate between good places, bad places, good times, bad times. Any time is same for him, because he is totally absorbed in divine spiritual consciousness. Ultimately, everything in this material world is material in nature. So better a focus. He is on a spiritual plane, so he does not discriminate between bad and good on a material plane anymore. So that's what we have seen in the example of Prahlad Maharaj also. Prahlad Maharaj was being taught by his gurus Shanda and Amarka. They said that we have to discriminate between friends and enemies. But Prahlad says, I cannot discriminate between friends and enemies. I only see every jiva as a servant of God. Every jiva is a lover of God. Potentially every jiva is a pure devotee of God. He is a child of God. How can I consider such a person as my friend or an enemy? So I cannot on a material plane. Okay, so in this way, devotee becomes transcendental to material things, material conceptions and bodily conception and material discriminations. But as long as one is not up to that level, jata shraddho matkathasu, tavat karmani kurvita, one has to do karma or Vedic injunctions till one comes to that great stage. Then Krishna further describes that the opportunity that we have in a human form of life is very rare. One has to utilize that human form of life to perform devotional service. Such beautiful shloka comes. Nrideha madhyam sulabham sudurlabham plavam sukalpam guru karnadharam mayanukulena nabhasvateritam puman bhavabdhim nataret sa atmaha. So nrideha madhyam sulabham sudurlabham. So this nrideha means human body is extremely difficult to attain. There are 84 lakhs of species. After passing through different species, a fortunate soul may end up in a human body. So it's sometimes easily attained, sometimes it's very difficult to attain. Nrideha madhyam sulabham sudurlabham. And this nrideha or this human body is compared to an effective boat. Plavam sukalpam guru karanadharam. And who is the captain for this boat? Guru. A spiritual master is the real captain for this boat of human body. And mayanukulena nabhasvateritam. For a ship to travel for a boat to travel on the ocean, material ocean now. So the ocean is the material world, material universe, and the human body is the strong boat, and Guru is compared to be captain. And for the boat to sail nicely on the shore, towards the shore, you should have some favorable winds. So those favorable winds are compared to scriptures. So mayanukulena nabhasvateritam puman bhavabdhim nataret sa atmaha. With all these facilities, having the strong boat of a human body, having a great captain of a guru, having the favorable winds of scriptures, if one does not transcend this material realm, such a person is atmaha, a killer of the soul. Soul cannot be killed. We have seen in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, but still Krishna says atmaha, or killer of soul, in the sense that the soul's real activity is to be situated in eternal loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna in the spiritual world. But if the soul is not in that position, the soul is just undergoing repeated cycle of birth and death in this material realm, And if one's activities are leading towards that perpetual transmigration in this world, then such a person is called killer of the soul, more or less. That's what Krishna is saying. So if one has access to a healthy human body, if one has access to a bona fide Vaishnava Guru, and if one has access to scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, etc., etc., then one is in the best possible situation to transcend this material existence. A human body, a Vaishnava Guru, and scriptures. If these three things are there, then we are the most fortunate people, fortunate entities on this entire universe. So if we utilize these three things, then we can effectively transcend this material existence. But the problem is the material mind that constantly distracts us towards sense gratification. So in this way Krishna continues the process of the description of the process of jnana and bhakti, and then we will go to 27th shloka, very beautiful shloka. Jata shraddho matkatashu nirvinnaha sarva karmasu veda dukkhatmakan kaman parityagepi anishwaraham tato bhajeta mam pritaham shraddhalurdrudha nischayaham jushamanascha tan kaman dukkho darkamscha garhayan. So in these two slokas, Krishna describes the condition of a neophyte bhakta. So we have discussed several things about an advanced devotee, but to come to that stage takes a lot of time. But a neophyte devotee undergoes different things. His faith can be awakened by hearing Krishna Katha. Jata shraddho mat kathasu. And he should be disgusted with material activities. But still he is unable to renounce sense enjoyment. He is disgusted with sense activities, but he is unable to renounce. He understands that these sensory activities are cause of entanglement. A neophyte devotee understands that if I indulge in sense enjoyment, that will be very detrimental for my spiritual progress. It is not good for me, but still because of the previous impressions and bad habits and still that lingering material desires, sometimes one may give in to those material activities without much desire. So a materialistic person is very enthusiastic to indulge in sense enjoyment, but a neophyte devotee, practicing devotee, not so advanced devotee, may also indulge in sense enjoyment sometimes out of past impressions or bad habit, but he does not, he is not very eager to do it. He does it by mistake, he does it accidentally, he does it just because of the force of habit. But at the heart of the hearts, he wants to give them up. He is disgusted with them. How long I will be like this? Krishna, please deliver me from this. So such struggle is good for a neophyte devotee to advance. Then he will remain happy by worshipping Krishna. He is happy while worshipping the Lord, but because of past material impressions, he may be a little distracted. But if he continues to worship Krishna, then one can come out of that stage also. Then even though sometimes he is engaged in sense gratification, he sincerely repents for that activities. So now an advanced devotee has no sense gratificatory thoughts at all. He has pure love for God. But a practicing devotee, a sadhaka, a neophyte who is not very much advanced, such a person has great faith in Krishna and Krishna Katha, has great faith in the Supreme Lord's protection, he has great faith in scriptures, and he worships the Lord sincerely, but because of past material impressions or habits, he may sometimes give in to sense gratification, but he is not very eager or happy with it, he is disgusted with it, and whenever he accidentally gives in to sense gratification, he regrets, he feels so guilty. So that kind of struggle is good, and Krishna eventually brings him out of that struggling situation so that he can effortlessly engage himself in devotional activities. So these are the glories of bhakti and bhakta. So materialistic person is eager for sense gratification. A neophyte devotee is not eager for sense gratification, but sometimes he may indulge out of bad habit, but he will come out of it eventually if he sticks to the lotus feet of the Lord. Then finally the result of practicing bhakti, Krishna says, Vidyate hridaya granthis chhidyante sarva samshayaha kshiyante chasya karmani mayi drishte akhilatmani. We discussed a similar shloka in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Vidyate hridaya granthihi. The heart, knot of heart is completely destroyed. Chhidyante sarva samshayaha. All doubts are completely destroyed. Kshiyante chasya karmani mayi drishte akhilatmani. So one can completely relinquish all karmic activities and one can see the Supreme Lord. One can be seen by the Supreme Lord also. So these are the glories of Bhakti Yoga. So in this way Krishna described various paths on the Vedic landscape. In this few chapters he spoke about his opulences. We discussed in the 16th chapter Krishna's various opulences. In 17th and 18th chapters we have seen how Krishna described the varnashrama system, and later we have seen Krishna's elaboration on the path of Jnana and Bhakti and various limbs of Bhakti. Ultimately Krishna's main emphasis in the entire Uddhava Gita is Bhakti Yoga, loving devotional service unto Krishna, although he touches on many other systems. But Krishna has to accommodate everyone. Someone is not qualified or someone is not ready for exclusive pure devotional service. Such people also should be accommodated. Gradually they need to be brought to Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. So Krishna describes other paths like Jnana, Varnashrama and all these things also, karma, deity worship, and later in the 21st chapter also we will describe the Vedic path. So we have completed 20 chapters. In the next episode we will begin the 21st chapter. Thank you all very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.